There are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense.
I've been in a Twitter war.
All of the 7 mountains of society to be taken over.
Those people in the teachers' unions are Marxist, cultural Marxists, often gay.
We're trying to recruit you to tuck your penis.
If you believe in evolution, why don't you just kill people?
I'm like, well then let's go fight. I'll just kick his ass. How's that?
Welcome back to the Fever Swamp Review, a podcast from the Colorado Times Recorder. I'm tired, folks.
Mostly I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. I'm tired of all the pain I feel and hear in the world every day. There's too much of it. It's like pieces of glass in my head all the time.
This week, we're talking about HB 1312, the transgender rights bill that is working its way through the state legislature. As we speak, it's being heard in Senate committee, and Republicans have done their best to drum up as much controversy as possible. They've staged multiple rallies, and there's, a long line of people waiting to testify in the Senate committee today on this bill. Maybe some of you have heard that I myself am a person of transgender experience. It's actually been about a decade existing in this world as a trans person. And I've spent a lot of my journalism career kind of writing about trans issues and trans people and policies around trans people. And honestly, at this point, I don't know what to say anymore. It's just the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again, right? But that's what they pay me the big bucks for. So today we're going to talk about HB 1312 and the various controversies surrounding it, right? So first of all, this bill. The main opposition to the bill is this argument from Republicans that somehow 1312 is going to allow the government to come and steal children from parents who refuse to be affirming, right? So this is what the bill says, right? The bill creates the Kelly Loving Act. If you're not familiar, Kelly Loving is the transgender woman who was killed in the Club Q shooting. And if you forget, that was the 2022 shooting in which a gunman entered an LGBT nightclub here in Colorado Springs and killed and injured a bunch of people. It's kind of a bit of a personal sort of horrific incident for me because among the victims of that shooting were former students of mine from when I was a high school teacher at Sand Creek High School. And I guess, of course, as many illustrious people have pointed out, being a trans person in public education makes you a groomer, right? And the end result of my grooming is that these poor kids were murdered and horribly traumatized when this gunman who exists in our culture full of anti-LGBT sort of sentiment that has become normalized to just a mind-boggling degree, just goes in and opens fire on people. And I know, right? Someone's gonna chime in and be like, well, actually, the shooter was non-binary, and yeah, okay. If you believe that, you should email me later. I've got a bridge to sell you, a freedom bridge, right? Waterfront property in Arizona. It's ridiculous. So anyway, So this bill creates the Kelly-Loving Act. And the big thing here is that people have gotten hung up on is this Section 2, right? It provides that when making child custody decisions and determining the best interests of a child for purposes of parenting time, a court shall consider dead naming, misgendering, or threatening to publish material related to an individual's gender-affirming healthcare services as types of coercive control. A court shall consider reports of coercive control when determining the allocation of parental responsibilities in accordance with the best interests of the child. So, this doesn't exactly say that the state is going to come and rip your children out of your Christian home and turn them into trans people or whatever, right? It's talking about in cases of like child custody decisions. And this actually has become kind of an issue in national politics, right? There's this guy in Texas named Jeff Younger who is involved in this like famous kind of custody dispute with his ex-wife about one of his trans kids, and he was not the affirming parent, and he didn't support the child, and it came at issue, right, in the court case because it wasn't just, misgendering and dead naming. There were issues around like hairstyles and clothing. And this is testimony from one of the attorneys, right? The father doesn't follow the recommendations of the counselor or the pediatrician, and he shames the child to try to make her feel bad for wanting to dress as a girl. Even though the father knows she wants super long hair, he shaves her head when he has the opportunity and leaves the other twin boy's hair long. So, I don't know if you would call that coercive control or whatever, right? But these are the kinds of cases that we're talking about, right? And a lot of the people that have been speaking out about HB 1312 kind of fall into this category of kind of angry divorced dads. There was some testimony recently at a Jefferson County School Board meeting this month where one dad spoke up. So we'll take a look at that clip. And then, right, later on, this month there was, the anti-1312 rally at the Capitol. And this is a clip from friend of the show, Jeff Hunt, on 710 KNUS, interviewing another divorced dad about his custody situation involving another parent.
What brings you out here today?
I came down here in support against House Bill 1312 because I have a daughter who I lost custody of because I don't affirm her gender.
Tell me kind of what happened. Was she, or how old was she, and what was the process for that?
It started around when she was 12 in the summer of 2022, and she was semi-normal then still, and the whole process after losing her between the schools affirming and doctors and psychologists has been a very sad path because she's gone down a precipitous decline with her mental health, and I believe that what professionals call a standard of care really is a standard of abuse, and they've done great harm to my daughter, and so I'm joining up with every force that I can against this. I think 1312 is a bad idea, and it's going to add jet fuel to an already terrible fire, which is going to cause more parents harm, more parental relationships, and I think schools and government especially need to butt out, and so do psychologists and doctors, frankly. These professions have somehow been ideologically hijacked, and it's really disturbing to me.
Tell me what it was like as a father to lose custody of your daughter when you believe that, one, that, she is, I'm guessing, biologically female, right? Yeah, and is not a male. You've seen her since she was born, and what that was like, and then, what it's like now.
It's been a heartbreaking experience losing my daughter because I love her dearly. We had a great bond when she was little and very close. I used to do all the things that a good father does. I've cooked for her, I've bathed her, I put her to bed at night, I read books to her, I take her around and entertain her. I try to teach her virtue, I tried to introduce her to Jesus Christ. And so what it's like now for her is I don't speak to her anymore because the situation has become extremely strained, and they've taught, what they teach these kids is very common. They teach kids that if you're trans and someone doesn't affirm it, then you can go ahead and be mean to that person, and it's okay to be mean to that person because they're wrong. I've been consistently vilified, and even though there's a dimension of I'm the victim, I'm still trying to live with grace, and I'm still trying to do the right thing. It's a waiting game for me because the situation is not going to turn around instantaneously. It's been heartbreaking for me. It's been heartbreaking for other family members of mine, like my mother and my sister, because we lost our young one in our family that we love dearly. And now, based upon my speech, if this bill passes, I'll be speaking against the law, because you can't say the true pronouns, which are consistent with what the words mean. I can't refer to my daughter as my daughter. I think that's some kind of strange, sinister fascism that came out of left field. I don't approve, and I'm indignant about it, but I'm still living gracefully.
Do you have any hope that there could be some reconciliation there with her mother, some new opportunities, or are you just totally on the outside right now?
I want to say that there's always hope, but her mom doesn't give me much hope. I think it was a situation that was exploited to get custody, like the power was seized to take custody away from me. But I think a lot of people who get into it, they find that it's hard to back out, because if you back out, suddenly you lose all of these people who were your support in that. They rally together on something ridiculous, and I think it's the nature of humanity. Vulnerable humanity goes along with people patting you on the back, and people are vulnerable if they're lonely, scared, or isolated, or if you're offering people like power and fame or notoriety or money, sometimes people are quick to just go along with any old thing, and this demonstrates how bad people are in the context of this subject matter. They're willing to mutilate children, and give them hormones contrary to their biology in order to be popular and part of the in crowd. And it's on an establishment level. So really like imagine you're a parent and your number one fear and your number one threat against you starting a family or having kids is the state coming in and wanting to take them away if you don't affirm putting them on a path to mutilation or medicating them. It's a frightening story to live in Colorado right now, but I love it and I come from here and I'm gonna stay here and fight against it. And I'm not planning on changing my speech for anyone, even though my spirit is scared of that. Like, I'm gonna still do what I do, and that's speak freely.
When was the last time you saw your daughter?
Over 2 years ago, because once I cut off what I considered to be an abusive relationship with a, what do you call it, a reunification therapist, the court was down on me. The child family investigator was down on me. It was always, you're bad because you don't affirm. And you can use heavyweight reasoning with some of these people and they will dismiss you no matter what for no reason at all except that you don't agree.
I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, I don't know if it needs, I mean, obviously it needs pointed out, right? Because this narrative is just being beaten into the ground by these people. But anyone who's been divorced is probably aware of the fact that custody situations are very difficult, very awkward, very tough cases to have to deal with. There's a lot of emotions, and beyond just the fact that they have a trans kid or a kid that's asserting some kind of identity away from their gender assigned at birth, on top of that, there are other issues, right, that may have contributed to the divorce in the first place. We don't know what those are. We're just hearing the one side from the aggrieved party who supports the political and ideological aims of, conservatives. So make of that what you will, right? And there's a lot of, like I said, I've written about this a lot. Other smarter people than me have written about this a lot. But I mean, it really boils down to what we've seen during kind of the modern era, the Trump era, like in the last 20 years or so. It's just this breakdown of consensus reality. So you have, one section of the population that acknowledges that gender dysphoria is a diagnosable psychological condition that can be treated with, gender-affirming healthcare. So for children, that's often a social transition, clothes, hairstyles, etc. As they get older, it might involve puberty blockers. And for people above the age of 18, there have been some rare cases where it's happened younger, and I'm sure everyone knows about that, right? But, gender-affirming surgeries, right? Surgeries which are, by their nature, kind of irreversible, permanent, lifelong things, right? And there are consequences for gender-affirming surgery and all of this stuff, right? But the vast majority, like the biggest consequence is that it alleviates gender dysphoria, right? So that's part of the population. And you've got, various public entities, government, policymakers, et cetera, who buy into this, who believe in this position, who have, researched it, who know trans people, who say, okay, we'll do this and we will try to do things to help accommodate these people and have a more just, equitable society, right? Very, very noble aims. You have another part of the population who, I guess the most vocal representation, if we're talking demographics, right, are kind of white Christian evangelicals. And they do not believe that gender dysphoria is a real thing. Representative Scott Bottoms from here in Colorado Springs, who been very outspoken on this issue, has called transgender people demonic and said they're the result of like demonic influence, or people that just say it's a mental illness, right? Just and I mean, yeah, it's just a mental illness, and instead of treating it with, the methods that a large body of work since, at least the 1940s has sort of suggested, they think that, trans people should just kind of suck it up and live in their, gender at birth, to make everyone else comfortable and happy. And they, so they reject the very premise of being trans in the first place. Like, it's not real. There aren't any trans people. They're just mentally ill people playing dress up, and you can talk about studies and you can talk about things, and they just go la 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 la. So if these people have read a book on the subject, right, it's probably Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Harm, and there are an increasing number of kind of anti-trans medical groups, groups like Gays Against Groomers and Do No Harm, that have come out, and they're making this claim that there's no, FDA-backed research, or that it's not, it's unethical and all of these things. And again, people have been transitioning since the 1950s. It was like, it's not a new thing, and trans people were existing. I mean, not existing just fine, but I mean, trans people have existed, right, for decades and decades in this country, and before this became a hot button political issue that they want to drive the point home and use trans people as a jumping off point for their gubernatorial candidacy or whatever else, right? So that's kind of the two positions, and there's no middle ground. Like, at this point in time, it seems really just like politics are like a zero-sum game, right? Whoever's in charge is in charge, and they get to do what they want, and the other side can deal with it. We're seeing that at the national level, right? Republicans are doing whatever they want, and Democrats are, making a lot of noise. And Senator Hickenlooper reintroduced the Equality Act today, so that's something. Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. But it's the inverse here in Colorado at our state level politics, right? Because the Democrats control everything, and so the Republicans are the ones who are just kind of making a lot of noise and doing all these publicity stunts and trying to churn up a lot of this outrage. And as I had mentioned, right, a lot of it is, once again, being driven by the evangelical Christian right. So earlier this month, a panel of, pastors from here in Colorado got together and they put on a protest at the Capitol. They had a wide variety of speakers, who were mostly pastors, but Scott Bottoms, who was both a pastor and a representative, and Brandy Bradley spoke at this event. The kind of I guess key headliner, I don't know, it was this guy named William Wolf, who if you're a normal person, you have no idea who he is, and I'm jealous, like, really. But if you follow conservative politics, particularly that intersection where faith and politics meet, William Wolf is one of the two wolves of Christian nationalism and this sort of things. And it's a stupid term. I'll talk about it here in a bit. But, William Wolf, he's part of the Center for Baptist Leadership, which has ties to this publication called American Reformer, which, I don't know, it might be generous to call it paleo-conservative, very, very right politically. And Wolf himself, obviously he's against, anything to do with trans people, anything to do with like LGBT issues, anything, that's like he's part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and that's a group that, recently is arguing about whether like women should be pastors, and these kind of conversations. It doesn't end with women being pastors, right? Should women be working outside of the home? Should women be able to get jobs in Christian ministry that should go to men who are fathers and have children? And it's just a lot. It's very conservative, very, very whatever term you want to use, right? But that's William Wolf. He also was tweeting the other day about anti-white racism, anti-white, if you remember from the Jared Taylor episode, because the dissident right, that's where they talk about the anti-white racism all the time. So Wolf was the kind of key speaker there, and we'll play that footage.
When, and if not here, then where will we stand to protect our children? This is the time. My name is William Wolf. I'm the executive director of the Center for Baptist Leadership, and my ministry is focused on exactly what this brother was just talking about, getting the churches across this country to wake up and get in the fight. Now, I focus particularly on Southern Baptists. You might say, well, why is that? Well, that's because there's 45,000 Southern Baptist churches in this country. There's 300 here in Colorado. Why aren't 300 churches here today? It's because the church is asleep at the wheel, and we need to wake up. So it is a privilege to be here today, to stand with all of you in this fight, in this noble and righteous cause. It's a civilizational fight to protect our children. Think about what it means to be a kid. To be a kid is to be vulnerable. To be a kid is to be voiceless politically. We don't let you vote in this country until you're 18 years old, the legal age of adulthood. Children are, as you could say, they're disenfranchised. Now, I'm not arguing that we lower the voting age. I do not want 12-year-old voting. Shoot, there's a lot of 32-year-olds I don't want voting. But because they cannot vote, they are politically voiceless. And that means that we, the adults and the parents, have the enormous privilege and responsibility of standing in the gap for them. We are their voice. We are their vote. And shame on us. Woe to us if we don't exercise that responsibility. Psalm 82, 3-4 charges us to defend the weak and the fatherless, and uphold the cause of the poor and oppressed, to rescue the weak and the needy, and deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And that is what we are here to do, to deliver the children of Colorado from the hand of the wicked. Because what is happening in your state government right now is wicked. Now, I didn't tell you all this. I'm from North Carolina, but I'm out here because I love this fight. And I'm out here because just the other week I had to go to my city council meeting in a deep red county in North Carolina and stand against all age drag shows. And that's how it starts, right? It starts with that, and then it comes to the state kidnapping your kid because you want to affirm transgender delusions. And so when I heard what was happening here with HB1312 and I looked the bill up, I thought, this bill could not be any worse if Satan himself had come up from hell and written the legislative text himself with his sulfur-stained fingers. Because if enacted, every child in Colorado would be handed over to the worst nightmares of the most extreme, radical gender activists. And what do these people believe? What do the gender ideologues believe? They believe in a lie. They believe in a fiction. But it's not just some harmless white lie. It is a dangerous, destructive, and deadly lie. They believe they can take your 12-year-old boy and somehow magically rewrite every single strand of his DNA, which is immutably stamped with XY chromosomes, and turn him into a girl. This is insane. This is insane. When we write the history books 2 decades from now, people are going to look back and say, what was wrong with those people? Because no matter what you do, no matter how many dresses you put on a boy, no matter how much you dye his hair pink, purple, or blue, no matter how much makeup you put on him, no matter how many poisonous cross-sex hormones you pump into his body, and no matter how many times you put his healthy, growing body under the sinister scalpel of so-called gender-affirming surgery, he will only and always be a boy. But by the time the transgender demons have had their way with someone like that, his mind will be broken. His soul would be crushed. His body would be mutilated. And those boys or girls who fall prey to this will look back and say, where were my parents? Where were those who stood up for me? And of course this applies to girls too, but I'm a father of 3 boys. And I think about this, what would have to happen if I had to have a conversation if one of my sons got confused with this insidious ideology? Now, to be clear, I don't put my kids in public school, so I don't think that's going to happen. So get your kids out of public school, and that'll help hedge your bets on this. But what if it did? And I needed to sit my son down and tell him, son, I love you. And I need to remind you who you are. You're a boy, and you're going to be a man, and God did not make a mistake when he made you. If this bill passes and I lived in Colorado, I would be a criminal for doing that. But when I look out here today, I don't see criminals. I see Christians and pastors and parents and aunts and uncles and, quite frankly, people who just believe in truth and reality. And we are here today to say enough is enough. We are here today to answer the call to defend our children before the eyes of the Lord. Because since the beginning of time, as surely as when that sun got hung in the sky and will always be the sun, God made them male and female. In his image, he created them, male and female. And you will always, only ever be male or female. So brothers and sisters, thank you for taking the time to be here today to fight this fight. Because if we don't fight it now, when will we fight it? Because if not you, then who? If not now, then when? If not here, then where? And as we finish this rally today and we go out to celebrate the resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, know that the empty tomb is what assures us of victory here. Because while we want the knees of every Colorado legislator to bow before Jesus, we know they will. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Will they bow before him now and they can claim him as Lord and Savior and be forgiven through the power of the cross? Or will they face him on that final day of judgment and bow before him as Lord and Judge, and he will judge them for the wickedness of this bill? We pray that they would be spared that fate, and through the power of your prayer, this Gideon's army gathered here today, through the power of the Holy Spirit, that can be accomplished. Thank you, brothers and sisters, and God bless.
So again, in addition to Wolf, there are a number of other pastors. The event was kind of organized by Chase Davis, who's a pastor out of Boulder with the Well Church. And Davis had been involved in some controversy because, again, very, very conservative church. He preached a sermon from like the book of Timothy, which is the section that in the Bible where it talks about women, staying silent and not speaking in church. And, it's an argument often used to kind of uphold patriarchy and trad everything. So he came under a lot of scrutiny for that. And again, the LGBT issues and, I don't know, like these are what these conservative churches believe, right? And for every, the Well Church, like pick any church in your community and really take a look at their statement of faith and these sorts of things. And like within the kind of Christian sphere, these sorts of arguments are not, you wouldn't think it would generate the amount of outrage it does, but I guess in Boulder, it does. But anyway, so organized by Davis and then a bunch of other pastors. Interestingly enough, one of the guys, Aaron Carlson, who's a pastor of a church in Denver, presented this interesting reading list, right? He was like recommended reading for everybody. And that kind of cracked me up, right? I made this joke on Blue Sky. about how, for a bunch of guys who hate socialism, this reading list has a lot of red flags. But among them, the first big red flag, right, was Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates by Matthew Trewhella, right? And of course, again, normal people don't read this book, but I do. And it's interesting, right? I think the crux of it is that people should kind of disobey government when they tell people to do things that goes against their particular interpretation of faith, right? And so this is a quote. The lesser magistrate doctrine declares that when the superior or higher civil authority makes unjust, immoral laws or decrees, the lesser or lower ranking civil authority has both a right and duty to refuse obedience to that superior authority. Right? Earlier in the book, in the introduction, he also kind of pointed out that thankfully, America's founders established 3 well-known boxes by which we can preserve liberty and resist tyranny. They are the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box, right? And by cartridge, he means ammunition. And if you've never heard of Matthew Trewhella, that's maybe concerning enough on his face. But Trewhella has a long history of anti-abortion activism. So as we talked about in the anti-abortion episode, there's that intersection of kind of faith and activism. He's been arrested for, protests that he's done at anti-abortion or at abortion facilities, at anti-abortion kind of events and protests. He also, interestingly enough, has an entry on the cult education website, and there are claims that he brainwashed a member into committing some acts of anti-abortion extremism. Wild claim, even wilder if you're familiar with MK Ultra and the various, there are people who will argue that brainwashing isn't real and it doesn't happen, but it happens all the time. It's it's a thing. There are entities whose entire business model is staked on brainwashing. And you see it a lot in cults, particularly, that utilize religion and these sorts of things. And I don't know, right? So Brandy Bradley spoke at this event. We'll look at her later. And she kind of took offense at this idea that, the secular liberals are calling churches cults and things like that. But these guys are a very particular kind of subset of Christianity that is not necessarily representative of, I guess, it's a particular faction, right? One of the other books that Carlson recommended was Mere Christendom by Douglas Wilson. And he is an interesting figure, very involved in culture wars and conservative politics. He runs a church in Moscow, Idaho. And there have been some kind of culty accusations and controversies that have been made about Wilson. He's also, again, as we talked about in the abortion episode, he, like George Grant, Wilson also kind of famously generated controversy for defending slavery, and there's just a lot of there, right? And so the Doug Wilson kind of camp create sort of an interesting subset of Christian groups. And I guess it makes sense, right? Because Davis's church has affiliations with both the SBC, but also Wilson's denomination, the CREC, which is kind of wild because all right, so gonna get a little weedsy here, right? Kind of a digression. But so Davis's church, interestingly enough, has affiliations with both the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, and Douglas Wilson's denomination, the CREC, which is kind of Reformed and Presbyterian, which, if you know anything about denominations, is kind of hilarious, right? Because they have two very differing perspectives or doctrines on the sacrament of baptism, which, as a Christian, is kind of fundamental to the whole thing, right? Baptists believe in a believer's baptism. Presbyterians and Reformed people, baptize babies as part of the covenant. So diametrically opposed there, but somehow Davis has managed to fit those two together. And not to put words in anyone's mouth, but I mean, it seems like a move of political economy, right? The uniting force is not theology or doctrine or Christ, but it is conservative Republican politics. And this subset of, Christian activists, and this is why I think the term Christian nationalism is kind of stupid. It's a term that scares liberals, but it's also a term that conservatives think is kind of based. And it doesn't really describe things because there's this broad swath of Christianity, right? You've got the Catholics, you've got the Charismatics, you've got, the Baptists and the Reformed, and they all have these different takes on all of these things, and they all kind of approach it differently. And, it's just not a helpful term, right? And when we see Matthew Trewhella and we see these guys kind of talking about this doctrine of lesser magistrates, right? As Trewhella kind of gets in here, right? He uses this example of Roman governor of Syria, Publius Petronius, right? Who stood up to this order from Caligula. And Trewhella notes, though Governor Petronius would not have known it as such, he was practicing what would later be termed by the reformers such as John Calvin, Christopher Goodman, and John Knox as the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, right? So much of these guys, their rhetorical aesthetic is being borrowed from folks like John Calvin and these early kind of Reformation figures. And just like with kind of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, they are shoehorning a very specific historical kind of ideology and perspective into contemporary American politics, and dragging these guys in on the side of, free market, capitalist, conservative Republicans. And look, I'm not saying John Calvin, right, the guy who burned a dude at the stake for denying the divinity of Christ, it would be an advocate of trans rights or anything like that. But the frame that they're borrowing all this stuff from, doesn't fit what they're advocating for in the political sphere, right? The reformers, guys like, John Bunyan and Thomas Watson and these Puritans from whom they're drawing a lot of their inspiration, were involved in a very interesting situation, right? They were being persecuted, in Europe by the Catholic Church and in England by the Anglican Church. And these were two churches that were in league with the government, right? There was the church and state were kind of wed together, the monarchs and stuff, very closely affiliated with these churches, and they were persecuting kind of the burgeoning Protestant movement and these people who didn't conform. And they were, that's why they came to America. But to kind of one thing that's hilarious, I recently read Pilgrim's Progress, and, John Bunyan, big advocate of, a person a lot of, folks in this camp, read and think highly of, and, great. But Bunyan himself was not Bunyan was an anti-capitalist in this, and maybe that's not a helpful term to use, but he was also living in this time where the market economy as we know it today was just starting to emerge. And this idea of like buying and selling and commodities and commerce and money was so like horrifying to Bunyan that he had these like these nightmares of like being forced to sell Christ. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the introduction here. What Bunyan considers sinful covetousness, or actually, let me go back, right? So, like most of his contemporaries, Bunyan connected market behavior with covetousness. In Christian behavior, he claims it is covetousness in the seller that puts him to say of his traffic, it is better than it is, that he may heighten the price of it, and covetousness in the buyer that prompts him to say worse of a thing than he thinks in his conscience it is. What Bunyan considers sinful covetousness is today the very foundation of theoretical and practical economics. We have largely forgotten the ethical objections to the market that were so familiar to Bunyan. He often points, for example, to the biblical texts in which Paul identifies covetousness with idolatry. Colossians 3:5, Ephesians 5:5, thus linking market exchange with the adoration of images. Bunyan believed that financial value constituted an artificial, man-made, and thus illusory set of meanings imposed upon the natural, godly, and thus true significance of the world. As Luther had put it, money is the word of the devil, through which he creates everything in the world, just as God creates through the true word. So, I don't know, you John Birch folks, sounds a lot like communism to me. But this is like the rhetorical tradition, right, that they're now trying to shoehorn into conservative politics. And you know, the debate about trans people is kind of low-hanging fruit, right? So we had the protest rally following the pastors speaking, a handful of elected representatives. So Scott Bottoms, who's running a gubernatorial campaign, right? He's announced he's going to run for governor, spoke. So here.
To say enough is enough. About 2 weeks before the election, we were voting on 79, constitutionalizing abortion. And I started getting phone calls and started getting emails from pastors. It was too little too late, but not for now. I started getting emails, phone calls, texts saying, Pastor, I think we can get behind this. I think we're going to tell our people to vote. Pastors that have never told their people to vote, saying you need to get out and vote. You don't have to tell them how to vote. Just open the Bible and say vote. For you to be standing here is something I've been praying about, and I am seeing this build. I'm still going all over the state. If you want me to come talk to your pastor and some friends of his and some church leaders, I'll do it. I'll have lunch with them. I'll do whatever I can, because I know if the church in Colorado wakes up, this is not a blue state. This is a red state. We believe in life. And we believe in protecting our children. And here it is from the pastor point of view. I'm a shepherd. I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 35 years. I know when David went before Goliath, David said to Goliath that first David was upset because Goliath was coming against God, not against the Israelite army. He was coming against God. That's right. And he told Goliath, I'm going to be able to take you because I've killed the bears and the lions. Well, David didn't kill the bears and the lions. God did. They used David to do that. Well, here's where we've been missing it in the church. Bears and lions have been coming against the church forever, and we haven't been standing up against them. We've been letting them come in. Sometimes we've been inviting them in. Guys, today is the day. This has got to stop. Enough is enough. We've got a Goliath in front of us, and this Goliath will be defeated. Why? Because we know if we stand up against the bears and the lions, we will defeat Goliath. Guys, enough is enough. Our state is not okay with this. Even the Democrat Party is not okay with this. But we have to have conversations. We have to have conversations that says there's a group of people in this house that are Marxists, they're leftists, and they're as evil and as ungodly as you can imagine. And they will run these bills. Some of you, this is the first time you've ever heard this subject. But we've been fighting against these evil bills at least the 3 years that I've been here, day after day after day, killing our babies, taking away parental rights, grooming our children. We've been fighting this. Thank you for seeing this and standing up with us. Church, we've got to stand up.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We've got to reclaim Colorado. Thank you.
So Bottoms also held a rally today. It was mostly like an HB 1312 an opposition rally, essentially. But he also kind of referenced, and I'm not going to get too in detail here for a variety of reasons, but he did this rally about a staffer at the Capitol who is trans and who, like every human being, has to use the bathroom, Republican staffers are raising a fuss about it, and again, the bathroom debate is like something that was going on in 2016 and 2017. It's none of this is new. And in Colorado, we've had a public accommodations law since 2006. It's not against the law for transgender people to use the bathroom or to use a locker room or to use a space. It happens all the time, right? Like, I have used the bathroom at the Capitol. Never had an incident, right? There are no real allegations of wrongdoing or misconduct. It's just the fact that there's a transgender person there and these people think it's gross. And that's essentially the argument, right? Like, trans people are gross. We don't want you to make our kids trans. If you make our kids trans, we want the right to be able to say that they are also, gross without having them taken away by the state. It's ridiculous. Here's Bottoms speaking today.
I misgender somebody or I dead name somebody. That is not a real construct. That is a make-believe thing. That is not real. And I don't have to be a part of it just because somebody wants to control my free speech, even if it's the Speaker of the House. They are not allowed to control my free speech, and I am not aligning with that mentality. Now, what we have here is the same time this 1312 is popping up, we also have legislative aides that filed a complaint because men are in their bathrooms. I don't care what the men call themselves. They're men biologically, and they're in the bathrooms of women. This is sexual harassment. This is a loss of freedom, a loss of privacy. And so when they file the complaint, the rules say of this House that is supposed to say separate from the leadership, like the Speaker, Majority, Minority Leader. It's supposed to say separate. It was released to them from the HR department. And then there is this confidentiality thing that they've been putting on top of it, and they were bullying these aides even yesterday, saying you will not come out and speak, you will not talk to the media, because there is a confidentiality agreement that the aides have held to, but the rest of the leadership has not held to. At least the Democrat leadership. I think our Republican leadership has held to it, but we know for sure the Democrat leadership has not held to it because lawyers were brought into this to attack the legislative aides. Now, they're making a complaint that's supposed to have whistleblower protection, and immediately this complaint is run all the way up the flagpole, and these women, these legislative aides, these professional women that are trying to get into politics, they are squished, told to be quiet, shut up, sit down, and know your place. When did we go back to that? Women no longer have rights to this? Well, I'm telling you, for me personally, enough is enough. This is not okay. We are going to together, you and I and the state of Colorado. See, here's the other side of the coin. This 1312, the Democrats are not even in favor of it. The Marxists in this House are in favor of it. The leftists in this House are in favor of it. But the Democrats of the state are not in favor of it. Every group you can imagine is coming out against it. But this Marxist group is going to say, no, we will squish women in the process. We need to reclaim Colorado, and we need to reclaim women. We need to reclaim their rights. We need to reclaim their privacy. We need to reclaim the integrity and the respect that we used to have for women in this state. We don't have it anymore. We are beating it down, we are destroying it, and we're destroying it over an ideology, and the leadership in the room behind me, right now, they are the ones responsible for destroying this and beating it down. We've got plenty of evidence to prove this. I've got videos to prove this, as this has got to stop. We need to reclaim Colorado.
In addition to Bottoms, right? So Bottoms spoke today. He spoke at the rally earlier this month. Brandy Bradley also took a moment to speak.
Mama Bear back in COVID, when they were attacking my children and attacking the schools and attacking the churches, and I knew nothing about politics, but when you come after my children, guess what happens? The Mama Bears come out to fight. And we were not going to stand for it anymore. When you call parent groups hate groups and you call the churches cults, guess what happens? This is what happens. We're not going to stand for it. We're not going to let you tell us what we need to do with our children. The government can't nurse my children's heartache. The government can't nurse my children's belly aches. And they certainly can't tell me what my children are going through. Coercive control is telling children that they were born in the wrong body. Coercive control is telling children that they are born a girl and are a boy. Coercive control is saying that XX is for boys and XY is for girls. That is lying to children. It is abusive, and we will not tolerate it in the state of Colorado. We will continue to fight against the lies, and we are in a dark state, and we are shedding light on the darkness, and that's why they are fighting so hard against it. And I promise you, I have no aspirations. I will continue to fight against this darkness until the day I die, and I will support every single one of you. So please keep fighting, please keep praying for people like me, and please keep showing up. We have needed you to be here. Thank God pastors are doing it. I wish my pastor from my church was here. Keep putting pressure on them. Keep putting pressure on the people in this building to say that we will not stand for you trying to take our children away from us. This is a line in the sand, and we have drawn it, and we are going to stand by it no more. Thank you.
And then also we heard from Representative Jarvis Caldwell from here in El Paso County. And he's kind of the guy who sort of started all the media attention around this bill back when it was going through the House. He's made a bunch of media appearances on Fox and other news outlets. So here's Representative Caldwell.
Let me start off by saying this. Parents and people who care about their children are not hate groups, and they are not the KKK. I don't care what anybody in there says. We care about our children. And something I want to say here is that, everybody has their hills, right? The hills that they're willing to die on. And with this bill, they have found our hills. And we are standing on top of it, and we have planted our flag, and we are saying enough is enough. This is a bridge too far. They have crossed the line, and now we're awoken. We are paying attention. And they're scared of that. That's why this bill has not been brought forward yet in the Senate. Because they know the attention it's getting. It's getting national and even international attention right now. We are the front line right now. This is the front line right here in Colorado. We are the ones holding the line, and we cannot let up now. And it's so beautiful to see this crowd here right now, because I was sitting in there, that's the House of Representatives right there on that second story, and I could hear you all cheering and chanting while I was sitting there on the floor right now. And guess what? If I can hear it, the Democrats can hear it too. And they know what's going on right now. Now, from the time this bill was introduced, I just kept thinking about it and why I was so mad. And the obvious reasons are there. But the more I thought about it, what came to me is, this is not my ideology. I'm not the one pushing this stuff on kids. They are. It's in our commercials, it's in our Disney movies, it's in our YouTube ads, it's in our schools. It's their ideology, and with this bill, they're saying, if we confuse your children and you don't go along with it, we'll take your children from you. And I'm not okay with that, and I know you're not okay with that right now. And Folks, it's even worse. All the focus has been on 1312, and we have to keep it on 1312, but I want to bring two other things to your attention if you're not aware. On the same day, which was a Sunday, by the way, and if you think that that was an accident, then you are mistaken. They brought us in on a Sunday to vote on 2 abortion bills and 2 trans bills that have to do with kids. One of those bills was SB 183, Senate Bill 183, that is taxpayer-funded abortions, which passed. And the other bill was House Bill 1309. What 1309 says is that your health care plan has to cover gender-affirming care. And when the Republicans ran an amendment to say you must exclude children from this gender-affirming care, the Democrats killed that amendment. Now, they talk out of both sides of their mouth, because in this bill, it talks about hormone therapy, it talks about chest augmentation and reduction, and it talks about genital surgical procedures. And so the question I kept bringing up is, you keep telling me you're not doing genital surgical procedures on children, but then you're going to pass a bill that says that our healthcare plans have to cover it? Which is it? Which is it? We all know what the actual answer is. That's right. Listen, it heals my heart to see you all here, and I've received hundreds, if not thousands, of messages and phone calls over the last 2 weeks. And I feel so blessed. God is so good, and I know God is watching us right now and what we're doing here, and he's uplifting us, and he believes in what we're doing here, and I believe in what we're doing here, and I love all of you, and I just want to say, just if you haven't been paying attention yet, please let this be the thing that makes you pay attention. And please go back to your churches, go back to your communities, and tell them what's going on here. And tell them what you did here today and the message that you heard, and that we have to get involved. Every presidential cycle election, 40 million Christians sit at home, sit on the sidelines, and they don't vote. That's right. And if you consider some of our elections get decided by 80,000 votes here and there in a couple swing states, imagine if 40 million Christians who sit at home go out and vote on the day of election. It's a majority they can never, ever overcome. And we'll take this country back and this state back if we do that. I love you all. Thank you so much.
That's the position. The bill, again, right now, it's they're hearing from witnesses in the Senate. Testimony probably going to take all night, so we'll know at some point tomorrow what's going on. And it's interesting. I was looking at some of the tweets, because that's what I do. It appears that there's like 4 overflow rooms for people wanting to come speak to this bill. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's insane, right? You have this unprecedented kind of output for things on the trans bill, but you don't have this level, like, you know, I've covered a lot of these kind of controversial issues that are very near and dear to the Christian right at the Capitol. You know, like, where were all these people for the various abortion bills? You know, it's actually been kind of dead, right? Like, I think the Christian right has realized that abortion is kind of a non-starter in terms of political issues that they can glom onto here in Colorado. So now it's just trans people that they've got to throw their weight behind. And that was kind of reflected in Amendment 79, right? If you look at the political spending during that campaign, the organizations that put money to oppose Amendment 79 were, you know, largely the Catholic Church and Andrew Womack's kind of ministry out there, right? These evangelical giants like Focus on the Family did not get involved in spending any of their copious resources on this kind of political activism around abortion. Focus on the Family has kind of taken a position on 1312, you know, and that does make sense, right? Because James Dobson, the founder of Focus on the Family, really got his career started by writing books and giving advice to parents that they should, in fact, you know, folks today would call it abuse. The term they use is discipline, you know, but this kind of like harsh sort of discipline against children is still today a mainstay in a wide variety of Christian evangelical spaces. And that's not anything new. And anytime there has been like legislation to try to provide more rights for children, whether it's trans or whatever, the Christian right has kind of been sort of stalwart at pushing back against that. And we saw it with like the homeschool or the school choice bill or ballot initiative, right? Like they love school choice, like big Republican kind of priority. But the Christian homeschoolers push back against school choice because the ballot initiative gave too many rights to children. Darn. And this, this is just the deal, right? In the 1980s, when Focus of the Family was kind of building its massive power base and kind of at its height, and there was the Moral Majority, which is essentially, kind of like the Moms for Liberty and stuff of today. I found this documentary from the Center for American Progress, which, yes, is a left-leaning, Democrat kind of think tank. But they did this documentary, and there's some interviews from folks in the early 1980s opposing an Indiana child abuse law, right? They're trying to strengthen child abuse laws. And again, the people opposing strengthening the child abuse laws were the Christian right. And maybe you'll find some of the arguments, some of the signs, some of the slogans familiar.
Any issue can become part of the holy war. In Indiana, the Moral Majority claims laws against child abuse are not compatible with the Bible. They rally around a man accused of beating his son, a charge made by the boy's grandparents.
I'm Dr. Greg Dixon. I'm pastor of the Indianapolis Baptist Temple in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm the National Secretary of Moral Majority, and I'm state chairman of the Indiana Moral Majority.
And can you tell us why you're here today?
Yes, I'm here to protest this horrible child abuse law that was passed by the Indiana General Assembly a few years ago. And what they're doing, they're establishing Gestapo agencies all over the state of Indiana called child abuse or child protection agencies.
They've taken this little boy out of his home and, for no apparent reason at all outside of what we would consider just normal biblical discipline. I talked to one attorney who said he locks his child in a closet whenever they disobey.
Fundamentalist Christians believe the Bible, and it even says that the blueness of a wound cleanseth the inward parts. Who owns the child? The state or the parents?
Does anyone own the child? Does the child have any rights?
God owns the children, and he gives the parents the right to raise those children.
In months of protest and demonstration, Reverend Dixon and his followers are the loudest voice heard in the legislature. And they succeed in weakening the child abuse law in a year when 8 children die of abuse in the state. Dixon moves on, using the story of this battle to raise money for the same fight against the same laws in other places. Everywhere, it seems, children are key to their plan.
So there you have it. That is the furor over 1312 in a nutshell. If you've liked this podcast, even if you don't like the podcast, hit like, hit subscribe, share, tell people about it, post it on social media. Get into some arguments down there in the comments section. Leave a review, whatever. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Just a reminder that the reporting here at the Colorado Times Recorder and for this podcast is made possible by the generous donations of viewers like you. So if you like our content, if you want more of it, if you support our reporting, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to our nonprofit newsroom at coloradotimesrecorder.com. Also, make sure to follow us on social media. Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, other sites. Please give us a follow. Stay up to date with all the new developments in the Fever Swamp. Stay safe out there.